Well, here we are again, and it looks like we're in the middle of another pass the buck scenario. You know, this is the Hillbilly Think Tank coming at you live from Tunnel Hills in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. And it is a day for being amazed at how bad leadership can pass the buck. Bad leadership will pretend to have balls, but doesn't have any balls. And that's what we're seeing right now coming out of the swamp. You know? They said they were going to drain it. No, they're just making it swampier. It amazes me. So we've got Pete Hegseth ordered double tap on civilians. These civilians were ordered to be slaughtered by this Kegsbreath. And I'm calling them civilians. I'm not going to call them terrorists until you, Hegseth, can give me undeniable proof. And it's easy, so easy. For so long in my naval career, from the first Gulf War all the way to Operation Enduring Freedom, when I was on deployment with the Marines, with an amphibious readiness group. So this amphibious readiness group housed the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit, Special Operations Capable. And I was the hospital corpsman, senior hospital corpsman for this Special Operations Capable platoon that was part of being able to run raids, do assaults on boats. We call those VBSS. And, it's the easiest, as I said before, type of raid and the most fun, in my opinion. Nothing beats either fast roping from a helicopter onto the deck of a ship or a boat at sea, or speeding over on another small craft and boarding a boat that way while at sea. So, hey, hello there too. Is it Yucky B and user QTFBOV6X? All right. Hope you guys are having a great evening. Hope you can hear me too. Last night I had some microphone problems, but I think I got that. Yeah, looks like I got it sorted out tonight. Let me know there if you guys can hear me, please. If you don't mind typing that there in the comments, that'd be awesome. But turned out, again, in the first Gulf War, I was a sailor on a fast frigate. In this fast frigate, we had teams that were sent on our ship. We had Coast Guard teams that were embarked on our fast frigate so that we could board all kinds of vessels as they try to come into both the Red Sea, if I remember correctly, and the Persian Gulf. So, yeah, it was definitely something that was not hard. We did it with a fast frigate, and we used our small boat that was part of our fast frigate. We'd load that small boat up from the fast frigate, zip it over to whatever ship we came across that needed to be searched. They would do a search. If nothing like contraband was found on the ship that we searched, then the ship would go on its merry way, But we never just went on ahead and willy-nilly blew ships out of the water while asserting that they were carrying something nefarious unless we went over and identified it. So, yeah. All right, got a few people here quoting scripture to me. Budgeting with Crystal. Okay, interesting. C9MP also quoting Jesus and patiently hearing me. Okay, cool. Not sure what that has to do tonight with talking about Kegsbreath, but that's cool. So when we did this in the first Gulf War, we had these capabilities. I was trained up for it, and we with the special operations platoon that was part of the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit, which has a whole battalion reinforced out at sea. We were trained to do this type of mission. We were trained for raids on land, at sea, on gas and oil platforms out at sea. It's not something that is foreign to our Navy. We know how to take control of little tiny speedboats like these that have been blown out of the water now so many times. All right. That it's not something that is foreign to the US Navy. We've been doing it since the US Navy came into existence. And the Coast Guard's been doing it. And like I said, in the first Gulf War, it was joint Coast Guard and Navy out there in the Persian Gulf and the whole area of operation that we operated in during the Gulf War. We can take little teeny tiny boats like these that have been blown out of the water. We can take them in our own control, search them, board them, figure out quickly what's going on. If there is contraband, we can grab it. If there's not, we can send them on their merry way. If there are personnel on there that are running contraband, we can arrest them and send them off to trial as the righteous nation that we are. We've been doing this again for many, many years. We did it when Jefferson went after the Barbary pirates. We did it when the pirates were attacking folks. And then we made a famous movie about it, about Captain Peters being rescued by Navy SEALs. So this is not something foreign to us, not something hard for us to do. But yet, Kegsbreath sat and bragged about him being the one that ordered the boats to be blown out of the water and everyone to be killed no matter what. No survivors allowed. Now that, he's finally had to listen to some inspector generals saying, hey, this sounds to us like war crimes. We need to inspect it. And now you got the congressional inquiries going on. Oh, so now he wants you to go on ahead and believe him when he's going to tell us that he had no idea what happened after the first strike occurred. Come on, man. You really expect us to believe that? Any of us that have had anything to do with military experience, we know that everyone sits glued to the comms, sits glued to the screen during and after a strike. No one leaves quickly. It's a bunch of hooey. Not when you're planning a war against a sovereign nation. You don't just run in and out of the room. No way in heck. When bin Laden got shot, heck, you had the room packed full of folks eagerly watching it. We still have pictures and videos of them doing that when it occurred. So, yeah, you can't play us this way. It's just not going to be this way. As I said, I come from a family. I'm a son of a son of a soldier. Alexa, stop. And by that, I mean so many generations of my family have been in the military. My grandfather was a judge advocate general. He was MacArthur's judge advocate general. My grandfather was one who was in Japan writing up the papers of surrender, took those papers of surrender along with the Japanese that were surrendering back to the battleship where he was right with MacArthur when MacArthur and the Japanese signed those letters of surrender that he had written up. Then he was part of the team that prosecuted Japanese for their war crimes that they had committed. And what were some of those war crimes? Shooting pilots that were stranded in the water when they would shoot our pilots down. And they would go through with their planes and strafe, meaning shoot, machine gun the pilots that were in the water, helpless. You know, our pilots were combatants. Their pilots were combatants. You're not supposed to do that to combatants. You're definitely not supposed to do that to civilians. And we have not had Congress declare war. So this is just shenanigans, hijinks. You know, my dad was also a combat vet. He was a Green Beret when he came back from Vietnam. While he was in Vietnam, he was with the 1st Air Cavalry, the Jumping Mustangs, the Air Mobile, I actually called it when they first started up. He was in the hijinx, survived that. Yeah. He described the atrocities of war to me. And, you know, it haunted him to his dying day when he died of cancer from Agent Orange back in 2015. You know, I've already shared my brother lost his leg and hand in Afghanistan. And 4.5 years later, my dad found my brother hanging in the closet. The next year, had to go be the one fly from where I was living at the time in Montana back to Lexington because the VA needed someone to allow them to make a decision about whether or not to pull the plug on my dad as he was dying from 4th stage. He was in stage 4 lung cancer by the time my wife and my son and I came back to Lexington. So I know the toll of war. And as much as I love the adventure of the military, heck, combat gets into your veins, gets into your soul. It's an adventure. But that being said, we cannot be cavalier about what we do in combat. We can't be the nation that abandons the Geneva Convention. So we've got to do something, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, hello, Abdul Karim, hello. All the folks that are saying hi. Hope you're having a great night. And yeah, recognize you there. Thanks for being on board. All right. So this being said, what are we going to do? Are we going to allow our current top chain of command to roll over on the small guys? Because I've seen hijinks in the military. I've been the brunt end of, well, I don't usually say this in public, but I might as well say it. I've been part of sexual trauma in the military. And I saw my chain of command just going ahead and rushed it under the rug. You know, after my chain of command used my story to try to take down the person who mistreated me. But once they got what they wanted, they let her off without even as much as a slap on the wrist. Matter of fact, she got promoted. And I was left wondering why I went through 6 months of pain and suffering, why they even bothered having me file reports, file complaints. You know, but that's what bad leadership will do for you. Bad leadership will leave you hanging. I've also seen some of the best leadership of my life in the military. Leaders that I would follow. If they said, I need you to jump off this cliff, I knew that they would either be leading me from the front or from right amongst my group. And so I would have jumped off a cliff if they said to, because I knew that they'd be doing it and they must have a reason. But it's because they developed and they fostered that sense of real leadership and real trust. But crappy leaders like Kegsbreath, they don't do that. They just depend on their macho bravado to carry them along. And you notice that bravado is dying now. He's not making any more memes about Franklin the Turtle blowing little boats out of the water as if it's a joke. Now he's saying, oh, he knew nothing about what occurred in the second of strike because he left the room. Big fat lie. Anyone who's been in a situation like that knows that the top brass does not leave and right away after a first strike. They wait until the whole mission is complete. And even then, they stay around because they'll debrief. So, yeah, this stinks to high heaven. But it's interesting. He's going to let someone who has had far many more years military experience under his belt, 4-star admiral, he'll let him go down due to his hubris. No, this isn't right. This is not the justice that my grandfather demanded for American servicemen and women that were tortured by the Japanese after the Japanese war was over, and we prosecuted the Bataan Death March crimes and other crimes committed by the Japanese. My neighbor in Lexington, Kentucky, when I lived in the Chevy Chase part of Lexington before I joined the military, and my dad lived there. He had survived the Bataan Death March. You know, I don't think that he would be pleased to find us committing the type of atrocities that he described the Japanese committing when he survived the attack on Bataan and the Death March, and he survived the prisoner of war camp in Japan as he was an officer. His brother, who was with him in the unit, was enlisted and perished off the coast of Taiwan after they both survived the Death March. He didn't know till after the war that his brother had died, eating his own shit and drinking his own piss in the bottom of a cargo boat that the Japanese had the enlisteds in because they felt that the enlisteds were worthless. And we're now trying to emulate this type of action. We're emulating the folks that do not care about the Geneva Convention. This can't abide. Not in a nation of righteous action like ours. We have got to get back to what it is that we stand for, which is being truly a beacon on a hill of democracy, the light shining for all nations to want to emulate, the standard for all militaries to follow after because we are strong and we are ethical. Plenty other countries have nasty, brutal, strong militaries, but they're unethical. But ours has not been one of those. We have been a military that strives to be ethical. And when we fall short, we hold folks accountable. But bad leadership will always try to let the blame fall on those below them. So I see someone here mention I should read the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, my dad used to talk about that. How it talked about war. I do find that fascinating. That could possibly, provide some insight into what we're going through now. Thanks for mentioning it. I might have to go look up a little bit of it. As per your suggestion there, Shal Javid. So anyway, this is just my opinion from here in Tunnel Hills in Elizabethtown. And I really think that we all know our taxpayers' dollars should be spent on making better infrastructure here in Hardin County, Kentucky, and all the counties in Kentucky. Right? Going off to start another war in another country that we just want their oil. That's not anything that Americans want. We use that pretext after Afghanistan to roll into Iraq, wasted human lives there to do that, drug out the war in Afghanistan far longer than it ever should have been. All that money that was wasted on that, because once we got the mastermind of the attack that happened on our soil, we should have been quick to wrap up everything in that place. And we could always leave our special operations group in that area, but we didn't have any business sticking around losing troops that weren't trained in special operations like we did for so many years. My brother didn't need to lose his leg and hand in Afghanistan, 6 years after I was there? And it wasn't right. And then I lost him. So, that being said, hope you all have a great night. Love your neighbors as yourself. We are a brother's keeper. We're a sister's keeper. And let's push for our country to use our funds to help us be our brother's keeper and our sister's keeper. God bless your corazón.